Thank you, Chair and committee members, for the opportunity to speak. My name is Lucas Zucker. I'm the Policy Director at CAUSE. We were tasked with working with Emilio on engaging tenants in Oxnard around how to strengthen renter protections and address housing issues. A little bit of context. Tenants make up 48% of residents of the city of Oxnard, and currently 60% of those tenants are considered rent burdened. And that's under the federal standard of paying more than 30% of their income on rent. We've also seen in recent years rent rising at over 3 times the rate of wages in the area. And so this is a housing crisis that is happening all over the nation and world, really, but particularly impacting residents of our local community. We work to engage some of Oxnard's most vulnerable tenants, particularly working class families, immigrant families here in Oxnard. And we worked with Emilio to organize a town hall where over 60 people attended in April, as well as a focus group in May that was a smaller group aimed to go dive deeper into the issues raised in the town hall. So the town hall reached kind of a broad scope of residents to find all of the issues that people are facing, and the focus group was intended to dive deeper on the root causes of the problems they were facing and solutions. And so during these town hall and focus groups, the number one concern raised time and time again was affordability. People not being able to afford their rent, the initial rent that they're paying is too high, and the yearly increases that they had been facing have been too steep. And so wages are not keeping up with these large annual rent increases. They also raised issues of unsafe and unhealthy housing and harassment from landlords, difficulties when trying to find housing, both in the challenge of finding an affordable unit as well as facing discrimination, and feeling like a lack of support from the city, not knowing where to send complaints or what their rights are, and not knowing how to make complaints anonymously because of fear of retaliation. When it came to solutions, there was a strong focus on rent control as a policy that could provide immediate relief from the housing crisis for tenants who are worried every year, every month, whether they will receive a rent increase that is too great for them to continue to afford their home and be displaced. So there were a lot of solutions, but so many tenants really focused on the need for immediate relief in the form of rent control. So in the context of rent control, we wanted to share a little bit about what existing legislation is relevant here. Their city does have a rent stabilization program for mobile home parks that has existed for many years. This program seems to have been fairly successful. As you can see here in recent years, since 1998, rents in apartments not covered by rent control have increased at nearly double the rate of rent increases in mobile home parks. The city's ordinance caps rent increases for mobile home parks at 67% to 100% of CPI. That's the Consumer Price Index or rate of inflation, depending on the year. And the city also has a rent board, which is created to set rent caps, exempt units from rent control, and take on disputes. There is also a statewide rent stabilization and just cause eviction protection ordinance, AB 1482, that came into effect a few years ago, that sets rent stabilization at an annual cap of 5% plus the rate of inflation, or no more than 10% per year. It also provides just cause eviction protections, limiting evictions to just causes such as tenants not paying rent, damaging the property, using property for illegal activity, or being a nuisance to other tenants. This ordinance exempts recently built units, single-family homes, and some duplexes, and it is temporary. It expires in 2030. In addition to that, many cities across the state have stronger rent control ordinances. The most common way that that's done is through a lower annual rent increase cap. So cities often link that to the Consumer Price Index, even as low as just allowing rent to rise at the same level of inflation. or setting an annual limit, say 2% or 3%. Many cities have stronger eviction protections as well than the state's just cause eviction protection. To put these rent issues in context of wages, we use the example of the Amazon warehouse under construction. That'll be a major source of new employment in the city, where wages are starting at $15 an hour. So if a full-time Amazon warehouse employee at $15 an hour were to attempt to rent a one-bedroom apartment on the market in Oxnard at the median price, they would be paying roughly $1,800 a month. And so if you calculate that based on their monthly salary, they're looking at paying 69% of their gross monthly income in rent alone. So that is a severe rent burden. Actually, even if the wage was doubled to $30 an hour, that would set them still above the federal standard for rent burden of paying more than a third of their income on rent. Just to look at that $1,800 a month and what annual increases are allowed from there. Under the current state law, rent can increase by 9% right now, so that the inflation rate is 4% plus that 5% under state law, and that would allow a rent increase of $162 a month on an $1,800 a month apartment. So that's a pretty significant rent increase, still allowable under state law. If the city of Oxnard had an ordinance limiting the local rent cap to the rate of inflation, somewhat similar to the city's mobile home park rent control ordinance, that would limit a rent increase to $72 a month rather than $162 a month. So that would be significantly more affordable for a local worker. And under a local rent cap of 2%, that would be only $36 a month. So what are the policies that cities can pass to strengthen rent stabilization? First of all, just cause eviction protections can be made permanent and expanded to all renters rather than the renters covered in the state law and the state law, which expires in 2030. Relocation assistance amounts for no-fault evictions can be increased. The state law only allows for 1 month, but city ordinances often allow for 2 months to even 6 months of relocation assistance. The annual rent cap can be lowered for eligible units, and so state law allows cities to set a rent cap for units that are multifamily housing, so not single-family homes, that are older, so built pre-1995, which would cover a significant amount of the apartments in Oxnard, and for units that are continuously occupied. And so when a tenant moves out, then the landlord is allowed to raise the rent to any level they want for a new tenant moving in. It's important here also to understand habitability enforcement and how that relates to rent stabilization, because habitability issues have been raised by both council members, city staff, and residents. So there's potential unintended consequences of having habitability inspections of rental units that are not paired with strong rent control policies, because they can result in landlords raising tenants' rent in order to cover repair costs or market those units to higher income tenants once the units are more appealing. And so this can ultimately displace the low-income tenants who were intended to benefit from the policy in the first place. And so the people who were living there are no longer able to benefit from the healthier or safer housing. So we have included here this triangle of just cause eviction protections, rent stabilization, and habitability enforcement, and the way that they relate to each other in preventing landlords from taking advantage of loopholes in any one of those policies alone and not in combination with the others. So our recommendations are that the committee moves to direct staff to return to Community Services, Public Safety, Housing and Economic Development Committee with a draft rent control ordinance, perhaps based on other local rent control ordinance that exist in other cities in the state. And number two, to support other actions mentioned by staff, including habitability inspections, legal aid for tenants, and wage development. Thank you so much for your time and attention to this issue.